Let's begin in Hong Kong, where a wave of prominent pro-democracy activists have been arrested. The move is seen as the latest escalation by police to thwart massive crowds from gathering in the streets. Well-known activists Joshua Wong and Agnes Chow were granted bail following their arrests. Now, both are charged with inciting a protest in June. A third activist, Andy Chan, is also under arrest. Authorities have warned residents against participating in unauthorized rallies. And here in Canada, Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland was asked about the situation today. Here's what she had to say.
Canada has a particular interest, given the 300,000 Canadians who live in Hong Kong. And so we are watching the situation closely and will continue to do so.
Hong Kong has been dealing with a growing political crisis for nearly 3 months now, but nothing has deterred the protesters so far. CBC's Sasha Petrusik is on the ground with the latest.
These three leaders are among the most prominent, but a number of others, local councillors and other members of the legislature, say that they also have been either detained or questioned by police over various activities connected to these protests, which have paralyzed Hong Kong over the past couple of months. Now, what is the government's strategy behind all of this? Well, Joshua Wong says that it is actually counterproductive because the government is responding to pleas for negotiation, for some sort of a conciliatory action with batons, with arrests, with tear gas. And this is what he had to say after he was released today on bail.
We shall not surrender. And I urge international communities to send a clear message to President Xi. Sending troops or using emergency ordinance is not the way out.
Now, the activists and the protesters that I spoke to today think that these arrests, far from sending a signal to the protest movement that it should calm down, will actually get people more riled up, that they will be more upset and more eager to get back out onto the streets, whether it is permitted or not, whether it is legal or not, whether they themselves risk arrest or not. More than 900 people have been arrested over the past number of weeks, but they don't think that they will be backing down anytime soon. There is a protest that was planned for tomorrow, another big one, perhaps drawing as many as 1 million people as it has in the past. That has been canceled today because the police just simply wouldn't give permission for the protest to go ahead. But there is a loophole which could mean hundreds of thousands of people could still be going out onto the streets. Under Hong Kong law, religious movements, religious marches do not need police permission to go out onto the streets. And it could well be that all of these people who were intending to go out on a political protest may suddenly be out chanting hymns and making their point in a very different way. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Hong Kong.
Okay, let's get some more insight into what is taking place in Hong Kong. Let's bring into the conversation Albert Chan. He's a former member of the Legislative Council of Hong Kong, and tonight he joins us from Vancouver. Albert, welcome to the show.
Hello.
So, sir, as you watch what's taking place in Hong Kong, and as a former member of the local legislation and the building there, is this democracy at play, or is this the antithesis of democracy?
Well, I think this is the worst situation in Hong Kong history. The government tried to use brutality and also excessive force, tried to suppress demand for democratic movement and also for freedom. And such kind of strategy, I don't think it will work. When you look at the situation, the government have used excessive force in the past few years, especially in the past 3-4 months. But the situation hasn't improved. Actually, the protests have been escalated and confrontation and conflict have been intensified. So if the government tried to use arrest, like what they did yesterday, try to pacify the confrontation, I don't think that will work. Many people will believe this is counterproductive. More people will turn out tomorrow, and also there will be more confrontation between police and protester, in the next few days.
So, sir, if you think that what the government, what Beijing, what the police have been doing so far is not productive, not going to get the protesters off the streets, then what should they be doing instead?
Well, because the government, especially those behind the scene, everything is controlled by the Chinese bureaucrat. The Hong Kong SAR government, including the chief executive, she doesn't have full control of the police, and she doesn't have the power to decide. So everything is manipulated, by those officials behind the scene under the Chinese rule. So they have this Chinese communist mentality. They want to control everything. If there are any opposition, they believe using force will be able to suppress those opposition. And in the past few weeks, we can see that they use triad, the police working together with the local gangs to beat up people. So in reality, it is a state-sponsored terrorism orchestra, by the Chinese communist officials. So the situation is going to deteriorate further. When you look at the past few weeks, for those people being arrested, some of them have been raped, some of them, they have fractured bones, and many of the rights have been deprived. People arrested have been deprived to see their lawyers before they sign the statement. So it is a terrible situation. I call upon the international community to be more forceful and also should take action against the Hong Kong and the Chinese government, especially the Canadian government.
Let me jump in there, sir, because you said something that jumped out at me and I don't want people to miss it, which is you described what's happening in Hong Kong in terms of the treatment of the protesters, the arrest, and the way they've been treated subsequent to the arrest as state-sponsored terrorism. That is a very serious charge or claim to make. So what is it that you want the international community to do? What is it that you're asking the Canadian government to do? Well,
there are a few episodes in Hong Kong in the past few weeks. It is quite clear that the police have been working together with the triads in Hong Kong. Hundreds of the triads have staked and also have iron bar, went out to the street and also went into the train station, directly went into the train to beat up people again and again. But the police didn't respond until about 14 minutes later, and all those triads were gone already. And so it is quite clear that there are collusion between the triad and also the Hong Kong government.
Okay, so what would you like? I understand that you want the international community to speak up. What should they do without seeming like they're interfering in a sovereign nation's activities?
Well, I mean, they can use trade embargo. They can use, direct support, especially the Canadian government. There are many Canadians in Hong Kong. They were being beaten up by police. Some of them have been arrested. The Canadian consulate in Hong Kong should go to see those people, should provide support to those people, especially those people are suffering. Their human rights, their freedom have been deprived. Some of their physical well-being have been, hurt. So there are a lot that the Canadian government can do to provide support to those Canadians in Hong Kong, and also to use trade as a means to ensure that those people, those government, use those terrible means cannot go, without being punished.
How do you see the situation playing out? If it's been already coming on 3 months of these protests and things continue to get violent, and we're talking about almost 1,000 people who've been arrested in the last 3 months, where does it go from here?
Well, the government should really address the issue. The protesters put towards 5 demands, including to withdraw the bill, to set up a commission to investigate police brutality, but none of those demands have been met. Those are very reasonable demands. If they agree, on those demands, I do believe the protester, will become peaceful and wait for the independent commission study. But the government seems to be using more high-handed approach. For example, the chief executive is considering using the emergency law to use those laws to deprive further freedom, and also to use those power to take away property rights and the assets of those people in Hong Kong. And this draconian measure will further anger the public. And I believe that the government use emergency law in Hong Kong, the opposition or the resistance, some of them may take more extreme means. For example, in Canada, in the 60s, you had the Quebec, the Liberation Front, using the violence, and also in the state in the 60s, the Black movement. They also have the Malcolm X and also the Black Panther. So if the government want to use excessive means and brutality further, I do believe some of the protesters may take extreme means to countermeasure, the pressure put on by the government.
Albert, do you wish you were there in Hong Kong right now?
Oh, I do believe, I do hope so. I've been in the protests, for more than 20 years, and I retired about 3 years ago, and I didn't foresee this is going to happen. And if I were given the opportunity, I would like to join the protest and join with the young people to fight for their freedom and fight for democracy. Actually, I was arrested together with Joshua Wong a few years ago, and but finally, we were found not guilty, in those charges, by the Hong Kong government.
So you've already gone through something quite serious along the same line. So you can certainly relate to what some of these young protesters are going through. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. I was pepper sprayed about 9 years ago, and the police changed their strategy and tried to begin to use excess force at that time. So the situation is even deteriorate further. Now they, beat up people regardless, of their activities, of their origin. So they try to use this white terror to try to scare off people. But I can tell the Chinese government, those white terror will just create further opposition, and the opposition will just, become more stronger and stronger.
So, sir, having gone through what you've gone through, both as a legislator, both as an activist, someone who's been charged, who's had to deal with the law in such direct ways, what advice do you have for those young 20-somethings who are out in the streets of Hong Kong right now?
Well, be water. This is what they have been advocating. Don't try to confront the police directly because they have stronger weapons, and you will get hurt. Try not to get hurt. Try not to get arrested. And there are lots of protest strategy. Then you can paralyze the economy. You can paralyze the traffic easily. I said that a few years ago in Hong Kong. 3 major car accidents in Hong Kong at the rush hour can paralyze Central, the business center, easily. So excessive force cannot stop protests and cannot stop opposition. People will design their strategy more wisely, and also to target the disruption of the finance center and also the economic development quite easily in Hong Kong. So I do believe the young people can learn, and they will adopt more flexible strategy, and the government probably have to learn their lesson if they try to use more excessive force.
Okay, sir, we will have to leave it there, but thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Albert Chan is a former member of the Legislative Council of Hong Kong. He joined us from Vancouver.